The sun sank behind the old Thorn Ridge barn, bleeding gold into the brittle Oklahoma dust. Isolde Merriweather stood alone by the auction pen, her back straight despite the ache deep in her bones. Her thinning silver hair was pinned tight, but the restless wind teased stray wisps around her lined face. Behind her, 5 sons, Sterling Creed, Garrison Trueblood, Wilder Blackthorn, Boone Ashcroft, and Quill Wakefield, leaned on the fence, their laughter sharp enough to cut. Inside the pen, the colt shuffled its bony legs, dark hide dulled by neglect, yet its eyes burned with something fierce, as if it still dared to trust a world that had forgotten it. The auctioneer's voice rasped over the murmuring crowd, $1, folks. Last chance for this worthless scrap. Anyone foolish enough? Sterling clenched his jaw. Mother, don't. We're down to pennies, and Harlon Vexler wants this land yesterday. This beast won't change that. Garrison spat in the dirt, glaring at Raven Spur, the name carved hastily on the colt's tag. Wilder and Boone traded grim looks. Only Quill stayed silent, eyes flitting between Isolde's weathered hands and the trembling animal. Inside her old leather purse clinked the final coins of Thorn Whitlock's forgotten savings, her dead husband's last promise to keep their roots alive. A whisper brushed her mind. Don't fear the hopeless, Isolde. Sometimes ruin hides salvation. Without another word, she raised her hand. $1, she said, voice soft but steady enough to hush the pen. A hush rippled. Even Raven Spur stilled, head lifting as if it understood it now belonged to someone who would fight for its bones. The gavel struck like a gunshot, and the silence cracked with her son's curses. Boone's boots scraped gravel, Wilder's knuckles whitened on the rail. Sterling turned away, eyes clouded by worry bigger than pride. She stepped into the pen, pressing her palm to the colt's coarse neck. He flinched, then leaned in, breathing warm against her ribs. Around them, thunder crawled over the horizon, thick with the scent of coming rain and old sins yet to surface. "You've doomed us, Mother," Garrison hissed behind her. Declan Thornridge, the town sheriff, stood by Harlon Vexler near the fence, trading glances thick with secrets. Seraphine Calvert whispered to Hollis Bramble, her eyes never leaving Isolde's back. Somewhere among the gathering shadows, Reverie Sinclair and Larkspur Holiday shared a look that hinted at truths buried with Thorn Whitlock himself. Guiding Raven Spur to the battered barn, Isolde felt the storm roll closer, rattling loose everything she thought she knew. By dawn, this fragile creature would be more than just her last gamble. It would rip open the past and bind every Whitlock soul to a reckoning no one could outrun. Rain hammered the tin roof of the Whitlock barn long after midnight, drumming out a rhythm that matched Isolde Merriweather's restless heart. She sat cross-legged in the straw beside Raven Spur, the colt's labored breathing filling the damp air. Every so often, he shifted, testing trust against a world that had done him no favors. Isolde's fingers traced the scars along his flank, each mark a silent question about the hands that had come before hers. Outside the stall, Boone Ashcroft and Wilder Blackthorn argued in harsh whispers. "We can't keep feeding that thing while Harlon Vexler circles like a vulture," Boone hissed. Wilder's voice was lower, harder. "You think throwing Ma's last hope out to the wolves will fix anything? She's all we've got left holding this mess together." Sterling Creed stood near the barn doors, arms folded, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He watched Declan Thornridge's headlights flicker at the end of the muddy driveway. The sheriff came around too often these days, poking at old debts and older rumors about Thorn Whitlock's final years. Sterling's gut told him that Raven Spur was somehow tied to secrets they'd buried with their father. Garrison Trueblood pushed past Boone, the storm lighting fire behind his eyes. "I swear, Ma's gonna drag us all under. Maybe Declan should just take this land and be done with it." Quill Wakefield, quiet as always, lingered by the loft ladder. His mind wasn't on the fight. His eyes traced the dark beams above, where decades of secrets slept like spiders in the rafters. Inside the stall, Isolde closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against Raven Spur's neck. Memories bled through the patter of rain. Thorn's broad shoulders at the corral gate, the hush in his voice when he'd whispered about debts owed not just in money, but in blood. She'd thought she'd buried those words the day they lowered him into the red clay behind the house. Now, touching this trembling creature, she knew the past was coming for them all, carried on 4 fragile legs. A sudden crack of thunder rattled the barn doors. Ravenspur jerked up, nostrils flaring, eyes wide with fear or warning. Isolde couldn't tell which. Outside, a single figure moved between the sheets of rain. Seraphine Calvert, her black umbrella useless against the wind, lips mouthing something Isolde couldn't hear. Behind Seraphine, Hollis Bramble lingered like a shadow, ready to carry tales no one wanted spoken aloud. Isolde tightened her grip on Ravenspur's halter, her voice a ragged whisper meant only for him. "Hold on, boy. Whatever you carry, we'll face it together, before the storm buries us all." Dawn broke grudgingly over Whitlock Ranch, painting the muddy fields in streaks of gray and gold. Inside the barn, Ravenspur lay curled on a nest of fresh straw, his sides rising and falling with each shallow breath. Isolde Merriweather knelt beside him, murmuring half prayers, half promises. Her knuckles were raw from the cold, but she hardly felt it. Outside, the faint chatter of her sons drifted through the barn boards like ghosts waiting to pounce. Near the fence line, Sterling Creed and Declan Thornridge stood beneath a thinning oak, their faces tight with things unsaid. Declan tugged at the brim of his hat, voice low. "There are rumors, Sterling. Folks whisper that your father owed more than money. Ravenspur didn't just come from nowhere. He's tied to the past, same as you are." Sterling's jaw clenched so hard it cracked. "Talk straight, Sheriff. What are you saying?" But Declan only glanced back at the barn, his eyes heavy with secrets he didn't dare speak aloud. Back by the barn doors, Boone Ashcroft stomped mud from his boots while Garrison Trueblood leaned against a post, arms crossed. Boone's voice dripped with bitterness. "Ma keeps feeding that bag of bones while we can't pay Harlon Vexler a cent. If Ravenspur croaks tomorrow, we'll bury him right next to our damn future." Garrison didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Quill Wakefield, who sat on an upturned crate scribbling notes in a battered ledger, Thorn Whitlock's old record book, rescued from a forgotten trunk in the attic. Inside, Isolde heard the rumble of male voices like a far-off thunderstorm. She pressed her palm to Ravenspur's chest, feeling his heartbeat stutter then catch again. In that fragile pulse, she felt Thorn's shadow watching her. Images flickered behind her closed eyes. Thorn shaking hands with a stranger in the dead of night, the soft weeping of Ophelia Bramwell by the well, a slip of paper hidden inside Callista Winslow's hymn book. So many pieces, scattered like bones across the years. Suddenly, a soft knock startled her from the memory. She turned to see Seraphine Calvert standing at the stall gate, hair pinned neat despite the wind outside. Behind her, Reverie Sinclair hovered, eyes darting nervously. Seraphine's voice dropped to a whisper. "Isolde, there's talk you should hear. Harlan's planning something tonight. He means to make an example of you, with or without the sheriff's blessing." Isolde's throat tightened, but she only nodded once, her hand never leaving Ravenspur's trembling hide. As Seraphine and Reverie slipped away into the dawn mist, Isolde forced herself to stand. She stroked Ravenspur's mane, her mind a storm of old debts and fresh threats. Tonight, under this creaking roof, the Whitlocks would face Harlon Vexler, and if the truth was half as deadly as she feared, Ravenspur was their last shield against ruin. Night crept in like an old sickness, swallowing the last streaks of daylight over the Whitlock land. In the kitchen, a single oil lamp flickered, casting shadows that danced across Isolde Merriweather's tired face. She sat at the battered oak table, hands folded tight, while Sterling Creed paced behind her like a restless wolf. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning that time was running out. Outside, Garrison Trueblood and Boone Ashcroft loaded the last dry firewood near the porch. The wind whistled low through the broken fence rails, carrying rumors and secrets along with the scent of distant rain. Quill Wakefield lingered near the barn, scribbling more notes in Thorn Whitlock's ledger. Each page held hints of debts never paid, names that no one spoke anymore. Names like Ophelia Bramwell and Declan Thornridge, scrawled side by side with question marks. Inside the barn, Raven Spur shifted uneasily in his stall. His eyes glowed in the lamplight, following every sound as if he sensed the trouble gathering on the wind. Wilder Blackthorn crouched beside him, brushing a coarse comb through the colt's mane, whispering words meant to calm them both. "Stay strong, boy," Wilder murmured. "You're the only hope Ma's got left." At the end of the gravel drive, headlights split the darkness. Harlon Vexler's black sedan crept forward, tires crunching on the loose stones. Declan Thornridge's patrol truck idled just behind, the sheriff's silhouette stiff behind the wheel. Hollis Bramble stood near the fence, gossip ready on his tongue, while Seraphine Calvert lingered in the shadows, lips pressed tight as she watched the enemy arrive. Isolde rose from the table when she heard the car door slam. Sterling moved to block her path, but she brushed past him, spine straight despite the tremor in her knees. She stepped onto the porch, lantern in hand, eyes locking with Harlan's as he approached. His suit was pressed too neat for country dirt, his grin too sharp to be trusted. "Evening, Mrs. Merriweather," he drawled. "I trust you know why I'm here." Before she could answer, Raven Spur whinnied from the barn, a high, desperate cry that sliced through the night. Harlan's eyes flicked toward the sound. "Still wasting feed on that dying thing, I see," he sneered. Isolde's jaw tightened. "Raven Spur ain't dead yet. Neither is this family." A low growl of thunder rolled overhead, rattling the porch windows. Harlan stepped closer, voice dropping to a poisonous whisper only she could hear. "By dawn, Isolde, you'll sign over this land. Or I'll drag every buried secret of Thorn Whitlock into the daylight." Isolde's fingers clenched around the lantern's handle. Inside the barn, Raven Spur kicked against his stall as if he, too, understood that tonight would decide whether the Whitlocks rose again, or were finally broken for good. Thunder rumbled low above Whitlock Ranch as Isolde Merriweather stared Harlon Vexler down on the sagging porch. Rain began to spit from the bruised sky, tapping the lantern glass in her trembling hand. Sterling Creed stepped beside her, shoulders squared, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. He'd seen too many good men ruined by Harlan's quiet threats and polite smiles. Near the barn, Wilder Blackthorn pressed his ear to Raven Spur's stall. The colt pawed the straw, nostrils flaring wide as if the storm outside echoed a deeper chaos inside his fragile heart. Wilder whispered to him, steadying his own breath with each stroke down the colt's neck. "Easy, Raven. Don't break on me now. You're stronger than any of us know." Inside the house, Boone Ashcroft and Garrison Trueblood argued in low, vicious tones. Quill Wakefield sat by the window, Thorn Whitlock's ledger open on his lap, pages lit by a single oil lamp. His finger traced the faded ink. Names, dates, whispered deals. Beside Thorn's signature, faint but unmistakable, was Declan Thornridge's mark, proof that the sheriff, too, had once been bound to debts bigger than law or friendship. On the porch, Harlan took a slow step closer to Isolde. His voice dripped false concern. "Sign the deed, old woman. I'll forgive a sliver of what Thorn owed me. Keep your sons fed through winter. Or stand stubborn and watch this place rot under rain and ruin." Sterling lunged forward, but Isolde lifted a hand, stopping him cold. Her gaze never left Harlan's shark-like grin. "Thorn's debts died with him," she said, her voice cutting through the storm's growl. "And if you think this family bows to men like you, then you never truly knew him, or me." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Harlan's smile faded. His eyes darkened like the clouds above. "So be it. By sunrise, the sheriff serves papers. And when the secrets crawl out of the mud, even your precious Raven Spur won't save you." Lightning split the sky, bathing the porch in white. Somewhere behind them, Raven Spur let out a shrill, defiant cry. Wilder's shout carried through the storm. "Ma! He's fighting. He won't give up." Boone and Garrison burst through the door, weapons of words and fists ready, but Isolde raised her lantern high. She stepped closer to Harlon, inches from his smug face, voice steady as an oath. "Then drag the past into daylight, Harlon Vexler. But you better pray you're ready for what crawls out with it." The wind roared through the porch rafters, Ravenspur's cries echoing the promise of a reckoning that would spare no soul who'd ever wronged the Whitlocks. The storm broke loose just before dawn, drumming so hard on the Whitlock barn roof it drowned every whispered prayer Isolde Merryweather had left in her throat. Inside, Ravenspur kicked wildly against his stall gate, eyes rolling white in the flickering lantern light. Wilder Blackthorn fought to calm him, voice cracking as thunder crashed overhead. "Easy, boy, easy. You hold us together, don't you know that?" In the main house, Sterling Creed slammed a stack of old ledgers onto the kitchen table, sending dust and ancient secrets into the damp air. Quill Wakefield hunched beside him, flipping pages, his fingertips smudged black with ink. Boone Ashcroft leaned in, breathless. "What did you find, Quill? Tell us this wasn't all for nothing." Quill's voice was hoarse but certain. "Look here, Thorn Whitlock didn't owe Vexler alone. He was paying Declan Thorn Ridge, too. For silence. For lies. For a name on a birth certificate that ain't his." Garrison Trueblood lurked by the window, watching Harlon Vexler's car parked under the oak, windshield wipers fighting the sheets of rain. He cursed under his breath. "Sheriff Thornridge's half this mess. And the other half sleeping in that barn, thinking he's just a colt." His eyes met Sterling's, both men realizing together that Ravenspur wasn't just a gamble. He was proof of everything Thorn Whitlock had hidden. Meanwhile, Seraphine Calvert braved the downpour, cloak plastered to her thin frame, as she slipped through the barn door. Her voice trembled as she spoke to Isolde, who stood stiff and wet by Ravenspur's stall. "I couldn't keep it to myself any more. I was there that night, Isolde. Thorn brought back more than debt from Thornridge Creek. He brought back blood, a child not born of your vows." Isolde's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes locked on Ravenspur, understanding crashing in louder than the thunder. Outside, Declan Thornridge appeared at the edge of the barn doorway, gun holstered but hand resting heavy on it. He stared at Isolde through the haze of rain and secrets. "I told Thorn to bury this. I told him no good would come of truth. You should have sold the land, woman. Now it all comes undone." Lightning lit up Ravenspur's heaving chest. The colt reared back, breaking free of Wilder's grasp, hooves striking wood and hay as if fury itself lived in his veins. He bolted past Isolde, past Seraphine, out into the storm. Isolde fell to her knees in the churned straw, the ledger pages scattered at her feet. One name burned through the blur of ink and rain, Ravenspur Whitlock, a living debt that neither lies nor guns could silence now. Ravenspur's hooves pounded across the drenched pasture, throwing up clumps of mud under the angry dawn sky. His wild cry split the rain and woke every hidden fear inside Isolde Merryweather's weary heart. She stumbled out of the barn, skirts heavy with water, shouting over the wind, "Wilder! Boone! Get him back before he breaks a leg!" Wilder Blackthorn sprinted after the colt, boots sinking into the sodden earth with each desperate step. Boone Ashcroft flanked him, cursing as lightning cracked above the distant hills. Somewhere behind them, Garrison Trueblood and Sterling Creed struggled to saddle the old mare that had once belonged to Thorn Whitlock, their father's ghost riding with them in every reckless choice. Quill Wakefield stayed back by the barn, clutching the open ledger against his chest as if it might shield him from the truth roaring through the storm. Under the oak by the road, Harlon Vexler watched this chaos unfold with a predator's patience. His coat collar turned up against the rain, eyes narrowed at Declan Thornridge, who stood beside him, gun at the ready but spirit unraveling. "You see now, Sheriff?" Harlon said, his voice almost lost under the thunder. All these years you fed her lies, and look at the cost. A bastard colt carrying Whitlock blood for every gossip to chew on. Declan's jaw twitched. For a heartbeat, regret flickered across his face, but his hand stayed on the pistol. Inside him warred the crooked deals he'd sworn to keep and the last shred of loyalty to a family that had once called him brother. If you push her now, Harlon, she'll burn this place to ashes before she signs. Across the pasture, Raven Spur slowed near the old creek bed where Thorn Whitlock had made his worst bargain decades ago. Wilder caught up, breath ragged, hands reaching out, voice softer than the storm. Easy, Raven. Don't run from us. You're one of us. You always were. The colt's sides heaved, black hide shivering as the past and present tangled in every heartbeat. For a moment, man and beast stared at each other, both equally lost, both bound by a truth no storm could wash away. Back at the barn, Isolde fell to her knees in the churned mud, Seraphine Calvert and Reverie Sinclair at her sides, whispering frantic prayers. The ledger pages fluttered in the wind like shredded confessions. Isolde's voice cracked through the pounding rain, an order and a plea all at once. Bring him home, Wilder. Bring him back before Harlon takes everything. This family stands or falls with that colt. Rain lashed the creek bed as Wilder Blackthorn stepped closer to Raven Spur, arms outstretched, whispering over the roar of the swollen water. The colt trembled on the muddy bank, nostrils flaring at every crack of thunder. Behind Wilder, Boone Ashcroft slipped in the wet grass, cursing as he tried to circle wide and cut off any chance of Raven Spur bolting deeper into the woods. Near the road, Sterling Creed and Garrison Trueblood struggled to rein in the mare, their shouts half swallowed by the storm. Garrison's eyes burned with fear that tasted too much like guilt. It's all coming out, Sterling. Vexler's gonna drag our name through every gutter from here to Thorn Ridge Creek. Sterling spat rain from his mouth, voice sharp as broken glass. Let him. We'll face it head on. But we don't let him take the colt. He's Whitlock blood, that means he's ours. Under the oak, Declan Thornridge held his gun steady, but his grip was slick with rain and regret. Harlon Vexler's grin curled like a snake's. Sheriff, time's up. Either you end this chase, or I tell every man and his dog how you and Thorn hid that bastard foal from the law. Who's gonna trust Thornridge after that? Declan's answer was drowned by a deafening crack of lightning that shook the branches overhead. Back by the barn, Isolde Merriweather clutched Seraphine Calvert's hand so tight her knuckles whitened. Reverie Sinclair and Hollis Bramble hovered near the fence, eyes wide as the past bled fresh into the present. Isolde's voice was hoarse from yelling, from praying, from fighting every demon that had clung to Whitlock land since the day Thorn buried more than money in the clay by the creek. "Hold him, Wilder," she rasped. "Hold my boy." Wilder edged closer, his boots sinking ankle-deep in mud. He could feel Raven Spur's panic like a heartbeat under his own ribs. "Easy, fella. We're the same, you and me. Broken promises in our bones, but we stand anyway." Raven Spur snorted, ears twitching, caught between flight and surrender. Another boom of thunder pushed him back a step toward Wilder's open hands. Suddenly, a gunshot cracked through the storm, one sharp bark that ripped through wind and rain. Wilder froze. Raven Spur reared, eyes wide with primal terror, hooves flashing above the raging creek. On the hill, Declan Thornridge lowered his smoking pistol, breath ragged, eyes wet with something deeper than rain. In the chaos, Harlon Vexler's mocking laughter rose above it all, echoing a promise that by dawn, the Whitlock secrets would drown just like the bastard colt in the rising flood. The creek had swallowed its banks by the time Wilder Blackthorn lunged forward, mud clawing at his boots as he grabbed Raven Spur's halter just before the colt plunged into the torrent. Rain battered them both, a cold whip that blurred vision and numbed skin. Boone Ashcroft skidded down the embankment, eyes wide at the rushing brown water. "Wilder, pull him back. If he goes under, he's gone for good." Up on the hill, Sterling Creed and Garrison Trueblood shouted over the storm, waving frantic signals to Quill Wakefield, who had abandoned the barn and now stumbled through the slick pasture, clutching the water-damaged ledger to his chest like a holy relic. Each step he took spattered ink and secrets behind him, pages tearing loose and swirling away like lost prayers. Declan Thornridge's pistol smoked faintly in the wind, his breath ragged as he watched the chaos below. Harlon Vexler leaned close, voice dripping poison even the rain couldn't wash clean. "Too late now, Sheriff. That thing dies, the papers come out, and Whitlock's claim to this land rots with him." Declan's fingers twitched around the grip, hatred and shame a storm louder than the thunder overhead. By the old fence, Isolde Merryweather stood soaked through to her bones, her eyes locked not on the men but on the colt thrashing at the water's edge. Seraphine Calvert gripped her shoulders while Reverie Sinclair wept into her hands. Hollis Bramble whispered to no one in particular, "The land remembers, even when we lie." Isolde's voice rose above them, cracking but unbroken. "He's not just a debt, he's my son's blood. Bring him back, or I swear this land burns with every lie buried in it." Wilder braced himself, muscles screaming, and heaved backward with all he had left. Raven's spur slipped, hooves skimming the swirling flood, but Boone lunged in time, grabbing the halter too. Together, drenched and desperate, they dragged the trembling colt back onto firm mud. Raven's spur collapsed between them, chest heaving, eyes rolling but alive, proof that sometimes hope does not drown, no matter how deep the water runs. On the hill, Declan Thornridge holstered his pistol and turned on Harlon Vexler with a look that could gut a man without a blade. "It ends tonight, Harlon. You want secrets? I'll speak them myself before dawn. But you'll not take another Whitlock soul to the grave." Lightning crackled above them as Isolde fell to her knees in the churned pasture, cradling Ravenspur's soaked head, whispering to him and to the ghost of Thorn Whitlock alike, "Your debt ends here. We pay it together, come sunrise or not at all." By the time the storm broke and the first shy light of dawn touched Whitlock Ranch, the soaked pasture lay scattered with torn ledger pages, hoof prints, and truths too heavy to hide any more. Isolde Merryweather knelt in the churned earth beside Raven Spur, who lay breathing steady at last, ribs rising and falling like a promise renewed. Her wrinkled hand stroked his wet mane as she murmured, "You held us together when nothing else could." Near the old oak, Sterling Creed stood shoulder to shoulder with Garrison Trueblood, Wilder Blackthorn, Boone Ashcroft, and Quill Wakefield. For the first time in years, no one argued, no one cursed the debts or blamed the ghosts. They watched Declan Thornridge stand alone before Harlon Vexler, who now looked less a banker and more a cornered fox. Declan's badge glinted in the weak morning sun as he drew a deep breath, voice clear for all to hear. "Thorn Whitlock hid a bastard colt from the law, hid more sins than I ever confessed. But I was there. I signed the lies. I took the hush money. If a debt's due, it's mine too." His eyes locked on Isolde's sons. "You owe Vexler nothing you can't repay with work and honest sweat. If he wants Whitlock land, he'll have to take it from a family that's ready to bleed for it." Seraphine Calvert, Reverie Sinclair, and Hollis Bramble stood at the edge of the clearing, silent witnesses as the past laid itself bare. Hollis, for once, found no gossip worth spitting into the wind. Instead, he tipped his hat to Isolde, a sign of respect he'd never shown before. In the mud at her knees, Quill Wakefield laid the tattered ledger beside Raven Spur's side, a relic of secrets now stripped of power. Harlon Vexler spat on the wet grass, eyes darting like a rat in daylight. "You think a confession wipes your slate clean, Sheriff? I'll have my claim in court by Monday." But Isolde rose then, spine straight despite her years, voice stronger than any man's threat. "You'll have to stand before every neighbor, every banker, every judge, and swear your greed is worth more than this family's truth. Good luck with that, Harlon Vexler." At last, the morning sun broke fully over Whitlock land. Raven Spur lifted his head, ears flicking at the soft rustle of wind in the fence rails. Isolde sank back to her knees, tears mixing with the rain in the dirt. Around her, her sons gathered close, hands on shoulders, scars and grudges forgotten for now. Thorn Whitlock's ghost drifted quiet in the hush of dawn, debts paid, lies unearthed, and a family still standing where so many had wished them fallen.